Well, this flag sure has taken a beating, hasn't it? Almost wonder if this thing should be hung upside down right now with what's going on in my country. Well, I fished all day. I got up at 5. And I literally fished nonstop until got up at 5. Got fuel. Drove in over an hour and hiked to bed. Went to one spot. Kind of sucked. Went up to another spot where the falls are. Caught a couple trout. Had a steelhead on. Didn't stop once. Didn't sit down once. I'm feeling pretty done. It's 3:30. And I would have stopped and got some shares out, but I spent basically my whole day at the waterfalls there, and they're just way too loud for the camera. So I'm here. I'm stopping. I'm just starting to leave, but I'm I don't know, about 65 kilometers from home. And I know there's a herd of elk down there behind me somewhere, so maybe we'll see if they come up. What else did I do? It's funny, I notice every time I go out in the woods, you always come across for somebody chop firewood, and they never take it all. I used to say to myself, why don't you go look for firewood? I could just freaking drive around and toss the leftovers in. But somebody left four mature, bone-dry fir rounds on the ground right over there. It was all I could do. I just about frickin' split my groin in half, I think, getting these suckers in the truck. I'll show you how big they are. I got them in. I wasn't leaving without them. I found a couple bonus cedar rounds, too. These things were frickin' heavy. Especially that one. But I put one of the smaller ones on the ground and I flipped that one on top of it first. And then I started building up the bottom, putting bark underneath, rocking back and forth and building higher and higher until I get the edge on the box. I lifted up and threw it in. Doesn't look like it, but that's a pile of deadly firewood. Good little score. Now, I'm gonna get some voices heard from right here with my broken flag. It's a broken country, huh? Quick message to all you law enforcement and military out there that follows the channel. I know there's a bunch of you. You've emailed me in the past. I understand that the majority of you are terrified of losing a paycheck. I'll tell you what, can you imagine what the grandparents are thinking right now after the display yesterday in Canada in the past couple weeks? Can you imagine? Many police officers were voicing it, support, reminding the country that they took an oath to uphold our Charter of Rights, which they didn't. The majority of them didn't. They failed. Isn't that brutal? They failed. They failed. They took an oath and they failed. This basically makes you the poster person of a loser. I guess you gotta be in a fight to be a winner or loser though, right? You gotta be in the fight. It's pretty nasty what's going on, man. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. I wonder how many of you in law enforcement have seen, you see the goon squads in the past regimes in third world countries, North Korea, Nazi Germany, wherever. And I'll bet not one of you ever dreamt you would be in the position of one of those goons in your lifetime and you took that oath. Whether you're Canadian or American, or Australian, or from New Zealand, all you law enforcement officers, you military people that swore those oaths. I couldn't only imagine how frustrating that must be to know that you are one of those third world goons being used as a political weapon against your own people. Even if you think what you're doing is wrong and you still do it. I couldn't imagine what that's like, going home and looking at your kids. Or your parents, your grandparents. People you grew up with, people you played hockey with. People you went and hung out with and partied with and had fun with and grew up with and went to school with. Imagine? Imagine what that must feel like. I couldn't imagine. I haven't been online or in service all day long. Who knows what went down today. I would imagine by the time I get home, I will have found out that the dictatorship goon squad put the fences up around the people. The people who are standing up for the freedom and their rights, the Charter of Rights, Canadian Charter of Rights, and I will bet you that all those men and women who used to be Canadian kids, I'll bet you they went in there and arrested all those innocent, hardworking, honest people today. That's my guess. Never give up. Never give up. You just regroup. Oh, Dave, my brain doing circles all day long. I went out, no matter, it wasn't too easy getting up this morning. This was bugging me, but I'll tell you what, when you're out here, you don't even know it. You're sick. So let's see, what do we got? Well, it's titled Steve. In caps lock. This is going to be a long email. My name is Craig Richardson. You can feel free to use it. Okay, man. Let's get into it. Some deals with a sighting by myself, my brother, and our friend John. I lived in the suburb of Manassas, Virginia. The year was 1973 and I was 16 years old. One day, I decided to ride my bike about 6 miles from my home in the Bull Run Trailer Park to a creek named Little Rock and Run. To get there, I traveled 4 miles on paved roads, 2 miles on Old Route 28 to the intersection of the main route, 28, and headed north about a mile to where a major power line crossed, and then the road onto the power line to the east until I reached the creek. Never been there. I was exploring. Found a long, smooth run about 100 yards into the woods on the left, north of the power line. Water was crystal clear. You could see the fish everywhere. I caught smallmouth bass, small rainbow trout, large sunfish, some big red eyes, rock bass. Went home and showed my brother and friend. We all aged to go back the next day. Probably ached to go back the next day. We did, however, upon arrival to the aforementioned smooth run, there was not a fish to be seen. The woods were silent and it felt weird. We decided to fish anyway. While we were baiting up, a rock the size of a softball came whizzing by so fast you could hear it coming. It hit the water with such force that water sprayed for 20 yards in all directions. We could hear something in the thick brush behind us. We all got spooked and ran to where we left our bikes. We had to cross the stream to get to them, and the hill we had to ascend was way too steep to ride up, so we had to run while pushing the bikes. About a half mile up, we were all winded and stopped. That's when John said, "Look," and we all looked back down to the creek. There on the edge of the woods where we had been fishing was what I would describe as a tall, hairy man. Dark brown hair covering the entire body. Please note that we were at least 300 yards away, so no real details except he looked at us for maybe 10 seconds and then he just walked across the power line, 200 yards wide, so we all got a good look. When we were safe and back at the highway, Route 28, we all agreed to not say anything to anyone about what happened. That's always the unfortunate part of the stories for me. We arrived back at home, went into John's house. His mom was in the kitchen. As soon as she saw us, she said, "What happened?" We said, "Nothing." "Why?" She said, "Bullshit, you're all white as a ghost." We never did tell anyone. Part 2. I'm now living in Summit Point, West Virginia. My brother, Red, had come home after school and walked in the house. My mother is sitting in her spot on the couch as usual, but she is white as a ghost. We say, "Hey, Mom," and there's no response. I tell my brother to call the rescue squad and then tell him, "No, wait, she's alive." but unresponsive. She can move her eyes, but seems to be full of fear. After about 15 minutes, she starts to babble. Another 15 minutes, and she can talk coherently. She tells us, I was sitting here watching the TV, and the front door opened. Something walked in, invisible. He came up to her and asked where the oil was. She said, I've been eating peanuts. She said that she could not move or fight, and that the thing probed every orifice of her body, including her personal regions. Now, about an hour's gone by, and she says, Craig, it sounded like they ransacked your bedroom. You should go check it out. I did. The only thing I found was my bank book sitting on my table by my window, and it was missing a $100 bill that I had tucked inside it. Well, my window was covered by paper curtains that were hard to keep shut, so I always pinned them shut with a Scotty Doll Bank. Scotty Doll Bank? It must have been a piggy. Anyway, it was full of coins. However, for the last few days, the curtains would be wide open when I woke up. I could not make any sense of it. But I told my brother that I felt like I was being called to go into the apple orchard across the street. That is when it really got weird. I went back out to the living room where my mother and brother were still talking and told them about the bank book and missing money. My mother said, look, boys, whatever it is, it did not harm me. She gave it a name. I forget the name. But my brother said, I don't care. If it F's with me, I will kill it. And right then, the entire trailer started to shake, and the most evil-sounding roar/scream you've ever heard enveloped the entire house. My mother begged my brother to shut up, and he did. Part 3. It's now dove season. Me and my buddy Donnie, don't mention his name, he's a blah, 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 blah. Okay, he'll never admit to what he and I witnessed. Left my house with our shotguns to go shoot some doves in the apple orchard across the road from my house. He's walking on my right as we walked down between the rows of apple trees, and as we were walking, I noticed a big opening in the tree to my left. It looked like the lowest branch, 4 feet off the ground, was under a lot of pressure. I told my friend to stop. I showed it to him. He said it was just the weight of the apples. I said, no. My sixth sense was on point. No fear, but I knew something was wrong. I pointed my gun at the opening, and all of a sudden, the branch flew up as something leaped off of it and hit the ground running. You could see the footsteps in the fallen leaves. This does not adequately account for everything that happened that fall. I had apples flying off the trees at me like they were thrown from a baseball pitcher, that fast, but not ever did one hit me. Then one night, all the dogs were barking and growling with that fear growl. I went out with a spotlight and shotgun, shined the light on the dog pens. We raised beagles and trained them for sale, and all the dogs were up on the fence wire and looking up into the sky. I looked up and saw a round craft with dimly lit windows, only 4, I think, and I shined my light on it. The dim light behind the windows went out, and it slowly moved away over the woods. The dogs calmed down, and I went back inside. I told my brother, my mom, that the dogs were barking at a couple of raccoons. Please note, this all happened long before the Predator movie. This followed me for 20 years and did shit just to F with me. Example. I packed my lunch to work every day. I put my brown paper lunch bag under my favorite hat down on the passenger side floorboard of the car, out of the direct sun. Come out to get my lunch and 2 sandwiches, chips or whatever, snack, would balanced vertically on top of the other, with hat balanced on top of them. Impossible. You'd think that even it could be done. You would think that even if it could be done, that it would fall down when you open the car door. Not so. As soon as you touched any of it, it would all fall down. It was a crazy frickin' email, man. I know that's a lot to take in, but there is more. The effing thing came through the trees, just a glimmer in 1980, and sat down beside me on a very large dead log I was sitting on while bow hunting. I had my bow on the tops of my thighs. It sat down on my right side. I had a 10-inch buck knife on my left hip, and I thought, grab it with my right hand and just cross-stab it to my right. Stab it in the belly or whatever. As soon as I had the thought, it said to me in English, don't even think about it. I could have killed you anytime I wanted. You're no challenge, and it left. I hope this helps someone else not be afraid. I still hunt and fish anywhere I want. That's one hell of an email. And I would imagine There's going to be people shaking their head going, yeah, right. Right? I know I'm right. But how many people have seen the shimmering light? How many people have heard something running, seen the footprints, seen the bush moving and haven't seen anything? How many have seen that glimmering thing chasing elk? How many people have seen crazy shit in the sky? Thousands, right? Thousands. One thing I can tell you that I wasn't there. And I'll bet you if somebody else had something that happened similar, they're going to email in now. Or they're going to share it or say something in the comment section below this video. Somebody's going to add to this. You wait. Thanks for sending that in, man. I don't envy you with those experiences, I'll tell you what. Experience at Granite Creek, California, and answers and questions. Dear Steve, your channel is now part of my daily routine and an excellent source for many. Thank you for that. And for the landscape, wisdom, and experiences of others that you share. Absolutely top-notch experience. First, you asked today in your broadcast, what brings people to your channel? My answer would be that it is a center for truth tellers, and your easygoing and open attitude attracts many of the same kind. A line from the film Field of Dreams strikes me. Build it and they will come. And that is what you've done. I applaud you. And the contributions of the other members of this family that participate in the broadening of our horizons. It is in itself a center. But don't ask me to define that. It is just a knowing. My experience with the unseen occurred when I was 16 years old, when I left ambitious enough to hike into Granite Canyon, a well-kept secret to a few, in the area just south of Carmel, California. I followed a cow trail over the ridge of wildflowers in April one year, alone, dropping down into a redwood forest that had a freshwater creek that I hiked to with others, but never alone before. Rumor was that it was haunted. My father had hiked through it throughout the Los Padre forest as a teen himself, though he rarely spoke of his experiences. That would have been back in the 30s for him and the 70s for me. After crossing the ridge and finding myself on a grassy bank alongside a stream, I sat down to eat my lunch, a French baguette, and a round of lapping cow cheese. I laid out on a checkered tablecloth to add to the ambience. Loggers are driving home near the side of the valley, but I keep hearing something in the timber on my left. There's big timber behind the camera. Big mountain. Anyway. I hate it when something catches my attention, it screws me up for reading. No sooner than the moment my lunch was out and I sat back in the sun, everything around me spoke in a silent whisper, not a scream, to leave immediately. Fear doesn't begin to describe it. Yes, danger was the feeling, and imminent danger. If it had been verbal, it would have been the words, "Go now." Odd, because there was nothing about the day to be afraid of, but it felt like I was being watched. Not by one, but by many, and the watchers seemed to be in the trees, up the stream, and almost in the air, just in every aspect of the experience. First, I laughed it off because I was a girl in my teens, feeling indestructible at being out on my own. But within seconds, it was no longer a joke or a paranoid moment, but an immediate concern. I left within minutes after packing up my lunch, and I never went back. Something was there that did not want me to be there, and it wasn't a human being. It was in the air, and knowing. I can't describe it any better than that. It was shared knowledge between me and something else, not a person. This message was that it was not my space and I should leave immediately. A few years later, my friends and I went hiking in the same region, this time starting from Palo, Colorado, for a demanding hike up the Pine Ridge Trail from the Boy Scout camp at Butcher's Gap. We arrived on the ridge, set up camp, and had a small fire to cook on before going to bed in our sleeping bags out under the stars. The fire was put out appropriately. Around midnight or so, a dense fog took over the ridge, and I awoke with an imminent fear of a forest fire. The fog I saw morphed into a forest fire, though there was no reason for it. No real fire, but an awareness that the entire ridge would be taken over by fire. The feeling was trapped. And remember, this wasn't the current day. This is almost 50 years ago, when fires weren't started like they are today. Like so many others have said, and like I have felt before in the wild of Granite Canyon, the message was to leave immediately. No one else in our group mentioned it, And we hiked out the next day, and I never went back. The feeling was much the same as the first experience in Granite Creek, which isn't far from Pine Ridge as the crow flies. Water, granite, steep cliffs, dense redwood forests, not public land, but state/national forest. In retrospect, I didn't see anything, but the sensation was much more intuitive than physical. I'm not a fearful person. I'm a forester's daughter as well, the granddaughter of a forester. My dad's father, who worked as a forester for the state back in the early 1900s, always in charge of land in Northern California, from Shasta to King City and to the west. They were firefighters, fire spotters, as well as land management back in the day. They certainly weren't talkers, and if one tried to ask about these experiences, it would have been met with a keen eye, a sharp expression, and zero disclosure as to unexplainable things. They might have known, but they never would have told. The beings of the forest are real, even if you can't see them. They are there. They use methods to communicate to people who can receive. We hear them, even if we don't understand what we are hearing and feeling. I'd like to toss a question out to all the people who listen to your broadcast and have been exposed to these experiences and see if they agree or not with the theory that I have. Perhaps they might contribute additional theories of their own. I'm from the belief that the people who have had near-death experiences in their lives are more receptive to the physical energy of these beings. An interesting study for those who have seen them or experienced them would be to ask, have you had a near-death experience? Somehow, I have an inkling that if one has had a near-death, they have an enhanced radar. I could explain that more in depth, and I'd be glad to, but I know you have a new property to tend to. A lovely wife waiting. Cute outfits for the animals, by the way, and other people who are equally as glad as I am for all that you do. If you read this on your broadcast, let me just say the channel and this experience is one of the finer things in life, and I can speak for all of us who say to you how thankful we are for doing what you do. All the best of all things wonderful coming your way, and the same to others that listen to your broadcasts, and a very Merry Christmas to everyone. Thank you, Randa. Okay, thank you. That's R-A-N-D-A. Randa or Rhonda? I'm guessing it's Randa. Appreciate it, Randa. You're a member of the club, without a doubt. And this channel isn't anything without people like you, and all the people that contribute, and all the people that come here to learn. So many frickin' emails. I'm trying to get back to the bottom, and then I stop and see it. Okay, I don't know. What's this one? So it's going to start getting wet here pretty quick. Definitely a storm rolling in from the ocean. It's not here yet, so I'm going to keep going. This is titled Another Strange Encounter, and I just marked it as red. Hello again, Steve. My name is Jerry. I shared my first encounter about when I was 7 years old in 1964 in Northwest Illinois a couple weeks ago. Around 1973 or so, again in Northwest Illinois, a friend of mine and I were doing what small-time teens do in a small town back then. Back road beer drinking. We were on a very remote road. Of course, after drinking a couple of beers, we had to take a whizzer, whatever. So, my friend who was driving pulled over and we got out and started peeing. On his side of the car, the scrub brush started shaking and thrashing about violently, and a deep guttural growl started. This is going on only about 15 yards or so from us. I zipped up and yelled at him to get in the upping car. He was freaking out, but he couldn't stop peeing. Kind of funny maybe now, but not then. He finally jumped in the car, threw it in drive, and we took off. And all of a sudden, something hit the back of the car with a loud thud. I saw a shadow of something very large. My buddy said he saw a flash of white. I didn't see white, but it happened freaking fast. We then went back to his house in town and looked at the back rear left fender and trunk, and there were claw marks on the car, no dents. Of course, people accused us of being drunk and making up a story. F them. I know what I saw. And to those out there that say it was a bear, there's no bears in Illinois, and no bears in Illinois had ever been reported at that. Plus, I know it wasn't a bear. Thanks again for all you do. For those who threaten you, you're right. They are effing pussies. Excuse my language. At 65, I still would kick their ass. And I believe you. By the way, I watched your wife's video making moose rib roll. Oh my God, that looks amazing. Still trying to find her link, but definitely want to see more recipes. Have a great day. Thanks again. All right, man. Gerald, thanks for that share, man. Cook It, Eat It on YouTube is her channel. I've been busy lately. Haven't been able to put the time in that she wants on it, but it'll pick up speed. We're going to do another version of the rib roll here pretty quick, too. All right, what do we got here? Mark, this is red. I've not seen what you talk about, but I believe. My story is in the 1980s. I would go whitetail hunting in Middle Georgia at my aunt and uncle's place. I'd park in their front yard, then grab my gear and walk to my stand. I'd not load my rifle until I was in my stand and put my safety strap on. I'd hunt through lunch into the time for the afternoon hunt. I would stay until shooting light was going. On this day I would stay until shooting light was going. On this day I started out while I still had light. As I got about 25 yards from my stand, there was an itch in the middle of my back and hair started standing up. When I would look back, I saw nothing. I walked around some curves in the trail I was on. As I cleared the curves, the itch and hair standing up came back. I never saw anything behind me or heard anything. Just been thinking about it. Well, I was short. Who knows what that was, Donald? I think we've all had our hair stand up on end when we're in the woods. That's for sure. Okay. Mark, this is red. Bigfoot. That's the title of this one. Steve's name is John. I have military and law enforcement background. With that being said, when it came to the night of my seeing Bigfoot, I've developed a no-nonsense policy about the subject. My story happened in the summer 2018. I was working for a food service company that delivers well into the night. We have about a 4-mile radius from our store for delivery. We are in a rural area of Virginia. This delivery was made down a county road in Rockbridge County. I had to cross a power line clearing to get to my customer's house. It was about 10 p.m. at night. After making my delivery, I again crossed over the power line clearing. I saw this creature, first with its eye shine close to the ground like a deer. The next second, I see these eyes start to rise up and keep rising up to the height of about 10 feet. I knew this is no deer. I hit the high beam lights in the Subaru Outback. That's when I saw its massive black body. It was far too large to be a bear. I wasn't afraid of it, however, I didn't stay around long enough to become frightened. After I got back to the store, I told the owner and fellow drivers that night of what I saw. Par for course, with this subject, I was the brunt of the jokes. Being 6'5" and over 300 pounds and over 40 naturally, I shut those dumbasses up. Point blank told the unbelievers your ass wasn't there, and truth be told, you had to shit yourselves if you were there. The one thing I didn't tell anyone is that I carry a 9mm pistol and an AR-15 in my vehicle to protect myself because dealing with money. But I firmly believe if I had used them on that creature, I would only have pissed it off. Although I've traveled through that area since then, I have not seen the creature again. Sincerely, John. And there's another one. Another member of the Club of No Return. They're just coming right in the door one after the other, right? One after the other. There's another one, short one. Mark, this is red. Wisconsin surprise. In August 2011, my husband and I were dropped on the Pine/Poplar River in Florence, Wisconsin to do a 3-hour canoe trip. The river was low. We walked our canoe a lot of the way. It was a sunny, beautiful day, but we witnessed a lot of wildlife. When we came around a bend, we saw something about 50 feet in front of us run across the river. It was a typical Bigfoot-looking creature. It was brown, hairy, and large. It made a splash across the river, which was very, very low, but only something that weighed as much as it did could do. I turned around and looked at my husband, and we both said, "What was that?" There are no campgrounds or cabins in this area of the river. We thought maybe it was somebody in a ghillie suit, but it was August, and no one was hunting. Then we thought maybe it was a person that was growing marijuana that was trying to scare us away. So I called the DNR later and I asked if there were any reports in the area of marijuana growing, and he said no. We continued to paddle past this point where we saw this creature, and were very scared because it disappeared when it hit the riverbank and made no sound at all. So we thought it was hiding and waiting for us. We had no weapons and no phone service. It was the most eerie feeling having to have to paddle past where we saw it cross, and it was so quiet that if it would have ran in the woods, we would have heard it with no problem. But there was no sound and no sign of him after that. I've never paddled so fast in my life, and I was visibly shaking when we finally got picked up at our drop point. To this day, we don't know what we saw, and people think we're crazy when we tell them the story. But I know what I saw, and it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a man. So my only conclusion is it was a Sasquatch. After a little investigation, I learned that there is a Bigfoot group in Florence, Wisconsin. Thanks for the time. Love your channel. And more people enter the club of no return, right? Storm's coming. I'm gonna keep going. I'm not done yet. I really gotta get home. Excuse me. Mark, this is red. Oregon elk hunt, wolves, and knocks. I was elk hunting in the early November 2021 in eastern Oregon, about 50 miles southeast of John Day, Oregon. My hunting buddy and I had drawn hair tags for the unit, and we're optimistic of a successful hunt. Okay, hair tags. I think that was a typo. Must have been bull tags. We had hunted the same unit for the first time. Excuse me. Shit. We had hunted the same unit for the first time in 2019 with no luck because we really didn't have any time to scout the area. We got lucky drawing a tag in 2021 since it's high demand hunt with lots of applicants in the tag draw. Anyway, I should backtrack a bit more to say that I have an older work buddy, Ken, that has hunted this same unit in the past, and I asked him for some tips of where to be concentrating my energy. He did, along with some stories. Yeah, those kind of stories. He was hunting around there in 2015 with another workmate, Rich. They were in a wall tent in the middle of a small clearing/prairie. In the middle of the night, they were awoke by loud banging, as in tree knocking on the edge of the clearing. He said it went on for several minutes as they stood outside the tent, shining lights across the field to the trees, and saw nothing. I later asked Rich about it. He said, "I don't know. I don't want to talk about it." I said, "Okay." Just went on with my day. People at work just listened to Ken's stories without a lot of its sincerity. Ken also had stories of the Greys. So back to 2021 hunt. My buddy John and I left camp a little late on the third day of the season to try a new area. We drove 3 miles west of camp on the paved Forest Service road to an old logging road heading north. It went up about 1,000 feet to the 4,000 foot mark before a dead ending at the gate. Beyond the gate, to the north, was an area that was logged maybe 40 or so years ago. The road behind the gate was now impassable. The fence that went to the east and the west of the gate is a 3-strand barbed wire. John crossed the gate to the north. I walked the fence to the east. It was cold. The ground was frozen and crunchy. I walked the fence as quietly as I could for about a quarter mile, slowly going uphill on the spine of a long butte with the fence. 20-foot fir trees to my left and older big trees to my right. As I got about 2/3 up the hill, it all turned back into old growth. Then off to the northwest, I heard a wolf howl. Mind you, Oregon Game Commission says there are none in this area. Then a second, and then a third. I believe I heard up to 5 wolves howling from my northwest all around to the east. I estimate a half-mile away. Anyway, I realized I was being surrounded and decided to backtrack. I radioed John and I said, "I'm getting out of here." He agreed. About 100 yards later, the sling of my rifle broke. I managed to catch it just before it hit the ground. Oh, good one. I've done that before. Crap, now I have to pack this 15-pound Remington in my hands. I set my rifle against an old down tree and was tying up some paracord as a temp fix. As I tie the last knot, I see motion on my right. Something big, black, and four-legged running at me 40 yards away. I thought bear, which I also had a tag for. I stood up, raised my rifle to see a 150-plus black wolf pound 150-plus black wolf running straight at me. Safety off, then it must have saw me and peeled off to my right, heading southwest. Now here's the fun part. As I'm following this wolf with my rifle, bam! Directly behind me and on the other side of the fence, no more than 100 feet, I hear a loud crack of wood on wood. I can only describe as a 10-foot-long baseball bat hitting a 6-inch diameter lodge pole. I didn't see anything. Not a sound, a motion, nothing. All I was thinking was, what the F was that? And where did that wolf go? Needless to say, I made sure my rifle and my 45 in my leg were good to go, and I steadily walked back to the truck with the rifle butted to my shoulder. I got back to the truck about 10 minutes before John. All I could do was watch the trees with that nervous wariness of, is there something out there? To this day, I don't know if the wolf was sniffing me out or just ran my way and got spooked when a camo thing stood up and pointed at him. I also wonder if some of those howls I heard were the wolves, and the knock was a warning to not mess with my buddy. Have you ever heard of wolves coexisting with the big furry guy? I'm curious to know without finding out for myself. Oh, and by the way, we didn't see an elk the entire season, which is not common. Thanks for reading and enjoy the hell out of your channel. Chris O. Salem, Oregon. Okay, Chris, thanks for that, man. No, I haven't seen them protecting wolves or running with wolves myself. I've heard people have mentioned them running with dogs. Heard once maybe about them being wolves, but the truth of the matter is, man, I've trapped wolves where these beings frequent a lot. I've had my hands on a lot of wolves, and nobody's tried to stop me. Nobody's messed with any of my sets. Nothing. Except that one time I could hear tree knocks while I was setting in that huge cedar swamp. The same trees that I showed you guys this spring when I hung the meat, and then I got the grizzly bear, the one-eared grizzly bear on the trail camera. 150-pound wolf. You got to have your hands on a lot of wolves to be able to, or it's got to have your hands on a lot of whatevers and weigh them to be able to accurately guess the weight. Lots of people look at a wolf and say, oh my God, things like 200 pounds, 150 pounds. And to be honest, the largest wolf I have ever trapped in my life was only 127 pounds. And that was a huge frickin' wolf. And that's after a lot of bloody wolves, too. I mean, there are 150 pounders out there, but they're very, very, very not common at all, right? Lots of people always ask me, how much do you think that grizzly bear weighed? I don't know. I always say I don't know because I've never weighed one. I've never weighed a mountain grizzly bear, so I would not be able to tell you how much it was, right? It's just my feelings when people have try to have a solid guess to how much something weighs. You have to have weighed a handful of them first to be able to have an accurate guess. Wolves are typically very, very tall. They're right up to here, but they're very lean, right? They're very lean animals. They're on the run nonstop. Anyway, sorry, man, I got off track there. But no, I've never heard of wolves and Sasquatch going hand in hand in my life. All right. Here's another one. Mark this as red. It's titled The Club of No Return. Hello, Steve. My name is also Steve, and I'm sure so many others appreciate what you have done and continue to do for us, the people. I've followed your channel for what I guess about 2 years now, but just recently subscribed. Yeah, I'm one of those. Sorry it took me long. And don't worry, YouTube will unsubscribe you. They always do. Anyway, here's my story. September 2018, my son and I went to a Boy Scout camp about an hour away from my home in northeast Tennessee. It is a well-known place, but I'll leave it there to protect their anonymity. So, by the time I arrived, had a late start, everyone else had their tents all set up, like so many teepees, away from the perimeter structural cabins in one section of the camp. I had to set mine up next to and between two of the cabins, away from most everyone, except, ironically enough, the scout leader who was staying in the cabin. Night fell quickly, and I struggled to get us set up. We played hide and seek during the dusk hour, and some of the adults were chatting in and around the picnic area that served as a center point to this cul-de-sac in the woods. Hadn't been dark more than 20 minutes. While we stood there chatting, when out of nowhere, this stone bounces off one of the cabins and scuttled across the wood deck / steps of the cabin, straight and to the right of me. Everyone just stopped at once. Acorns were falling, and it was September, but this wasn't an acorn. It sounded like it hit the side, not the roof. Hit the side, not the roof. Not long after that, we hear a distinct knock in the distance. I'm no outdoorsman and admit it, but it doesn't take Davy Crockett to figure out that it was close enough to hear, but far enough to not get a pinpoint or gauge exactly how far it was. I immediately went into Spidey sense. Sorry to use that reference, but that's what I imagine it would feel like. My hair stood up, my pulse rose, and my breathing increased. Everyone else just carried on, and maybe made a comment or two about it. But I was glad it was dark, so they couldn't really see the fear that had to be screaming across my face. I'd also started writing off the stone as nothing, too, until I heard the knock. Then there was another one. To our 6 and just left. It was closer, but still a ways off. I struggled to believe what was happening, and everyone else didn't even seem to notice. That's when I realized they had no clue what was going on. I'm sure they heard it too, but they just didn't know. So I tried to ignore it. Until yet a third knock resonated through the campground just before I got to my tent. 3 knocks with triangulated positions of our camp. I'm laying in my tent trying to get my then 7-year-old son to sleep. Acorns falling off on the tent with no wind and humid air. I've never wanted to leave a place so bad in my life. I should have left maybe, but I stuck it out. A couple of scout leaders walked around the camp with flashlights until midnight or so. I'm laying dead still with this ridiculous 4-inch lock blade in my hand and across my chest. Knocks every 20 minutes or so, and always an answer from the other directions. Then this crashing sound came like someone threw a Volkswagen Beetle into a pile of branches. I'm sitting there thanking the stars my son didn't wake up. He was on the side of the tent that faced a tree, and I felt it was the safest place I could give him at the time. I wish now I just packed our shit and got in the cabin, but alas, I lay there all night hearing noises and crashes, and this guttural but tangible speaking about 50 yards away. It only happened once. It was around 3 a.m. or so. I had my phone and was peeking every so often for time. It sounded like, no joking here, the Tasmanian Devil from the Looney Tunes, but it was deeper and fast, like a speed talker on a car commercial. That's when I thought seriously about getting out of Dodge. I just prayed to God to spare my son from these things. He lost his mom the next year to cancer. It's been tough. But he was spared that nightmare of nights because he can sleep through a nuclear bomb, apparently. I heard something heavy with padded foot sounds walk away from my tent after I dozed off around 5 a.m. I was exhausted from work and all the tussle. It was just loud enough to wake me, and I immediately went into fight or flight. I would have died, but the bastard was getting all 4 inches of lock blade up his ass as my death wish. I swear it. But no, it just walked away, and then the glorious sun came up about 15 minutes later. That was the longest 15 minutes of my life. At dawn, I finally got the nerve to exit my vinyl sanctuary. It was still fairly dark as the sun was behind the horizon. I had my flashlight out and scanned the perimeter in all directions. 20 yards away or so, at just the end of the last cabin, I catch eye shine. I freeze the beam and my breath broke. Now I was grumpy, tired, and fed up with this whole thing, so I walked straight toward the eyes, saying, "I see you," in whispered tones. "I see you." Then another eye shine appears, and I stop for a second. I forgot about my son in the tent for one split second, and it gave me pause because I didn't want to get too far away. I raised the lamp up to get a better view, and standing just inside the camp perimeter are 2 white-tailed deer. Relieved and somewhat humiliated, I went back to wake my son. Why had deer entered so close to humans, I thought. Maybe they had no fear because people can't hunt there. Or maybe they knew sanctuary next to us was the better alternative to those beings out there. The worst part of it all is that no one mentioned it all that morning. The worst part of it all is that no one mentioned it at all that morning. It left me thinking it was my own imagination. I tried to say something to one woman about all the noises that night at breakfast, and she just deflected the conversation with something else. I think she heard it too, but didn't want to know what it was, so it was awkward. I could see discomfort in her eyes, but no fear. I was completely drained that day and had to trudge through all the day's activities, so I didn't bring it up again. Fast forward 6 months or so, I run into the scout leader at a grub and pub by chance. I brought it up. He tells me he thinks I was being haunted. He said he heard some weird sounds, but no crashing sounds. Maybe he meant to type, he thinks you are being hunted. He said he heard some weird sounds, but no crashing sounds. I don't know, Steve. People are crazy, but I know I didn't imagine myself into that miserable state of mind, nor did I wish to be exhausted the next day and have some of that joy stolen from me and my son. And the last person that would go looking for these things, if sounds could kill, they shot me in the face. I can't imagine what carnage they could bring should they choose. I'd really like some answers, but our society today has been watered down with lie after lie. Has it ever? It's just more entertaining for most just to point and laugh than to listen to think. Thanks again for this opportunity. I hope my input brings solace to another, but it doesn't get lost in the archives. Peace to you and yours. Thanks for that email, Steve. Appreciate it. I can imagine having that vulnerable feeling with a small child in a tent with me. Nothing to protect us. That'd be frustrating. Oh, man, I'm done. I'm still sick. I'm tired now. I'm done. Oh. I gotta get going. Time to get going. Funny, you can see something dark beside a tree. I'll show you what I was just looking at, so you can see why I was doing the double take. I always do double takes. It's just out of habit, right? Just a stump. But once you're seeing something, those sort of shapes stand out no matter what for the rest of your life, no matter where you are when you're in the woods. You always have to look to be certain. I'll be back.